gonna roll, we're gonna roll, we're gonna roll the union on. We're gonna roll, we're gonna roll, we're gonna roll the union on.
Safety on the job, workmen's compensation, tax reform. These are vital issues for working people, and especially so in this election year. This month on COPE Report, 3 AFL-CIO experts will discuss these issues in depth on Side 1. Also, you will hear AFL-CIO Secretary-Treasurer Lane Kirkland on the importance of voting this year. And on Side 2, President George Meany's Labor Day message. All on COPE Report.
We're gonna roll, we're gonna roll, we're gonna roll the union on.
Both the Senate and the House have voted to limit coverage of the Occupational Safety and Health Act to plants employing more than 15 workers. George H.R. Taylor, Executive Secretary of the AFL-CIO Standing Committee on Occupational Safety and Health, explains the net effect of the limitation.
This effort, which was successful in both houses of the Congress, to curtail, in effect, coverage of the Act to small plants by virtue of prohibiting inspections in plants of 15, has come about as a result of a very successful pressure campaign by the chambers of commerce in this country, in the various states. The net effect of it is, at least for the fiscal year 1973, is to amend the Act to exclude most workplaces in the country in non-manufacturing, nearly all workplaces in agriculture, and deprive the people who need the protections the most from the proper protections of the Act.
The new limitation was enacted largely through the efforts of the Chamber of Commerce. COPE Report asked Mr. Taylor if all businesses take such a negative attitude to safety on the job.
I think the more enlightened corporations take the position that the less absenteeism because of injuries and illnesses on the job, the more production, the greater profits, and the less problems you have in replacing personnel that has sustained accidents or illnesses or even deaths. This is a dollar proposition, and it also goes into the field of unemployment compensation. But among the smaller plants and some of the more dinosaur-like corporations, there is a knee-jerk reaction against regulation per se. And if these organizations feel that they can delay, take matters to court, seek congressional relief, such as they have done on the numerical prohibition in the House and the Senate on inspections, hack away at the flanks of the Act, they will do so, hoping for a better political climate, where they might be able to reduce this Act to a research rather than an enforcement type of program.
Environmental blackmail. That's the term the AFL-CIO uses to describe industries that threaten to close down rather than comply with pollution control standards. We asked Mr. Taylor if the AFL-CIO has a program to help workers who lose their jobs because of pollution control orders.
We have proposed a program of relief for workers who may, in a bona fide way, lose their job because of process change resulting from a anti-pollution standard or an order by a governmental agency which might affect the process itself and as a result cause a job loss in a particular plant. Our program consists of certification by the Environmental Development Agency of areas where there would be job loss. And all individuals who would be involved in such job loss, should it transpire, would be certified by the Secretary of Labor to obtain a number of relief programs, which would include mortgage payments and rental payments in the event that they might be in danger of losing their homes by default, extension and increase by means of federal grants and aid of unemployment compensation, moving expenses in the event that they are able to obtain a job somewhere else nearby and haven't the money to move themselves, and assistance after they get there until they're properly settled, and a number of other programs along that nature, food stamps, etc.
The National Commission on State Workmen's Compensation Laws recently delivered its final report. COPE Report asked James O'Brien, Assistant Director of the AFL-CIO Social Security Department and a member of the Commission, what was recommended.
The Commission made a substantial number of recommendations. In almost every instance, the Commission's recommendations were consistent with changes in the Workmen's Compensation Program that the AFL-CIO has advocated for many years. For example, compulsory coverage of workmen's compensation laws for all wage and salary workers. This has been a long-sought goal of the AFL-CIO. Full medical care for work-related injuries and diseases without limitations as to time or dollar amounts in the payment of medical care. Another major recommendation of the Commission involves a substantial improvement in the benefit structure of our workmen's compensation programs. The Commission found that workmen's compensation benefits that are now available to injured workers and their family are not only inadequate, they are also inequitable.
But Mr. O'Brien does not think the report went far enough.
The report could have gone, in our opinion, much further in terms of implementing the recommendations of the Commission. The Commission, unfortunately, chose to suggest that Congress may wish to wait until 1975 to act on the recommendations of this Commission. The labor members of the Commission took exception to this recommendation in terms of implementing the Commission's report. We feel the states have had 60 years in which to establish a modern workmen's compensation program. The states have repeatedly demonstrated that they are unable or unwilling to do so. And we feel that the Commission report should have stressed in a more positive fashion that the Congress should act immediately.
Mr. O'Brien outlined some of the major deficiencies in workmen's compensation laws for Cope report.
In some states, the workmen's compensation laws are elective. This means that an employer, or a worker in some cases, can simply reject the coverage of the Act. If an employer does reject the coverage of the Act and a worker is injured on the job, the worker may have had no knowledge that the Act had been rejected by the employer. The worker would have no coverage under the state program. However, he could sue the employer for damages. There are a number of states today that still have elective laws. Many state laws do not cover small firms. The laws usually are stated in a fashion that they cover employers of so many employees or more, for instance, 4 or more. One state that comes to mind only covers employers of 7 or more. Other state laws exempt certain occupations, for instance, retail trade establishments. Other state laws, medical coverage is limited to a specified amount of money or to a certain period of time. These are the major deficiencies in the law that the Commission looked at and made recommendations to improve.
He explained that while most state laws allow for an injured worker to receive 2/3 of his weekly wage, most workers actually receive far less.
Most workmen's compensation laws specify that an injured worker will receive 66 2/3% of his actual average weekly wage. However, the laws then go on and contain a provision that says the benefit amount will be limited to a certain number of fixed dollars, maybe $50, maybe $60. The $150 a week man, instead of getting a 66 2/3 wage replacement benefit, is limited really to a 1/3 wage replacement benefit under these situations.
The labor movement does not intend for this study to sit on a shelf and gather dust. Mr. O'Brien.
From a labor point of view, we certainly intend, since the Commission report was submitted to both the President and the Congress, to seek, in the next session of Congress, legislation to implement the recommendations of this Commission, particularly the essential recommendations that the Commission suggests be established as federal mandates that all workmen's compensation programs should be required to meet.
We're gonna roll, we're gonna roll, we're gonna roll the union on.
Tax reform will be a major issue in the 1972 elections. Cope report asked AFL-CIO economist Arnold Cantor if tax reform is one party's issue.
We don't see any difference between a tax reform proposal for Republicans and tax reform for the Democrats. Among our major positions on this is that there are certain loopholes in the tax structure that are primarily or almost exclusively found in the realm of wealthy individuals and wealthy corporations. And to the extent that these loopholes remain in the tax structure, the dissatisfaction that you're talking about is going to remain. And for that reason, for reasons of equity, for reasons of federal revenue, we feel that these loopholes must be plugged up. And we want the money necessary for public investment. We want people to have confidence in their government. To us, there is a very, very close equation between the willingness of people to have confidence in their government, the willingness of people to support their government, and the feeling that they have that the tax laws are fair and equitable and treating them fairly.
What are some of the more blatant loopholes? Mr. Cantor.
The Revenue Act of 1971, which was passed this past December, had a depreciation speed up for corporations, which cost the federal treasury $2.4 billion. They instituted the investment credit. They called it a job development credit, which there was absolutely no demonstration or anything that this would in fact lead to jobs. It just amounted to a 7% discount for corporations on any purchase of machinery and equipment. This is scheduled to cost $3.6 billion in this fiscal year, and it's going to go up to $4 or $5 billion in later years. And the total picture on just these two things that were done in 1971 is over a 10-year period. We expect over $80 billion in federal revenue loss as a result of corporate giveaways in this tax law, and this is $80 billion that could have been used to clean up our cities, clean up our environment, and make the public investments that we need so badly.
The administration has been toying with the idea of a value-added tax. We asked Mr. Cantor, what is a value-added tax?
This is a type of sales tax. The fact of the matter is it's cut and dried. It is purely and simply a sales tax. It's a tax on consumption, and it's a tax that's paid by consumers. Our position is very, very clear on this and very unequivocal on this. We do not feel that the federal government should get into the sales tax.
But the administration says that if a value-added tax is enacted, that property taxes will go down.
The idea of linking the property tax with a value-added tax is just pure and simply a facade to get this type of tax through. There's a tremendous amount of dissatisfaction, and appropriate dissatisfaction, with the property tax. However, there is absolutely no reason to substitute a regressive national sales tax for a regressive local property tax. There are many, many other alternatives. There is a need to clean up the property tax. There is a need to have more money going into the schools and to have less reliance on the property tax for financing schools. But the alternative certainly is not to levy a regressive national sales tax.
What are the chances for substantive tax reform?
There's a number of economists around the country now saying that a tax hike in the future is necessary. And in effect, they're second-guessing Congress, and they're giving up on the notion of tax reform. The AFL-CIO is not prepared to give up on tax reform, and we think through a lot of efforts, there is a good possibility that we can get substantive tax reforms through.
A few union members are saying that because the AFL-CIO is not endorsing a presidential candidate this year, union members should go fishing on Election Day. Nothing could be further from the facts. In this Labor Day statement, AFL-CIO Secretary-Treasurer Lane Kirkland made that clear. Allow me to read a portion of his message to you. We do not advocate that any union member, or any citizen for that matter, should go fishing on Election Day. Any citizen who does not go to the polls, regardless of his personal feelings in any single contest, is abdicating his responsibility as an American in every other contest, said Mr. Kirkland. It is vitally important that every citizen exercise his franchise. In 1972, the AFL-CIO is mounting a maximum effort to elect congressmen, senators, governors, and legislators who believe in progress for America. We will judge candidates, and we ask our members to judge candidates on the basis of what they stand for and against. Do they line up on the side of the great mass of working Americans, or are they water carriers for the wealthy, the bigoted, and the special interests? Mr. Kirkland continued, the issues of jobs, health care, consumer protection, clean air and water, tax justice, education, and civil rights will be before the Congress next year. Any citizen who does not vote on Election Day votes no on each of these issues. Therefore, we urge every union member, regardless of his or her position on the presidential candidates, to work for the election of congressmen, senators, governors, and legislators who stand foursquare with the best interests of working people.
We're gonna roll.
COPE Report continues on side 2 of this cassette with an important message from AFL-CIO President George Meany.
We're gonna roll the Union on.
In his annual Labor Day message, AFL-CIO President George Meany addressed himself to the issues confronting the next Congress. He explained why the AFL-CIO will be working hard for the election of senators and congressmen who are friends of America's working men and women. President Meany.
Since 1894, we have set aside the first Monday in September to honor the millions of working men and women of all races and creeds whose sweat and skill have built America and made this the greatest land on earth. This is Labor Day. It is a well-earned holiday for workers and their families. It is also a day for workers and their unions to take stock, to look at our country and our government, and to see how far we have come and how far we have yet to go. This Labor Day is important for another reason. This is an election year. Politics is in the air. And Labor Day marks the real beginning of the campaigns for political office in every state and congressional district in the nation. At stake are 33 Senate seats and all 435 seats in the House of Representatives. We of the AFL-CIO are determined to elect a Congress that is friendly to the interests of working people, regardless of who occupies the White House over the next 4 years. For we know from experience that whoever the next president may be, we cannot move forward unless we have a Congress that understands the needs of our people and responds to these needs. Who are the people? The great majority of them are made up of working men and women and their families. And what they want can be summed up in one phrase: a fair share. American workers want a fair share of the abundance they have produced, no more and no less. We want a fair share tax system. We don't have it. We have a tax system that is rigged against wage and salary earners in favor of big business and the wealthy. Today, a family of 4 earning $10,000 a year will pay an average of $905 in federal income taxes. If the $10,000 was income from state or local bonds, the family would pay no taxes at all. This is just plain unfair. There is no other word for it. It's unfair to tax the wage earner in full, while corporations and the wealthy can evade their fair share through a host of gimmicks. Loopholes, exemption, depletion allowances, accelerated depreciation write-offs, investment credits, you name it. What it comes down to, for example, is that last year, United States Steel could get away without paying 1 cent in federal income taxes. But you can be sure that the steelworkers had their taxes deducted from their paychecks every week. We need a Congress that will put an end to this outrageous tax discrimination. And we need a Congress that will fight off any attempt to enact the so-called value-added tax. This is just another term for a national sales tax, which would shift an even heavier burden onto the backs of low and middle-income Americans. The time has come for a tax system based on ability to pay, with everybody shouldering his fair share. That's the American way, as labor sees it. We also need a Congress that will put America back to work. There is so much work that needs to be done. So many houses, schools, and hospitals to be built. So many mass transit systems and other public facilities to be constructed. So many anti-pollution and public service projects that we desperately need. It just doesn't make sense to have 5 million Americans out of work. It's a tragic human waste, and it hurts our economy. Unemployment turns consumers and taxpayers into welfare clients. All of us bear the costs and the consequences in rising welfare costs, unemployment compensations, lost tax revenues in business markets, high crime rates, and all the rest. But it doesn't have to be this way. There is no economic law that says we have to have 5.5% unemployment, or even 4% for that matter. We have the means to create a full employment economy. We've done it before. What we need is a Congress that will put the means to work and provide a decent job for every American who wants to work. Now, a decent job means decent wages. This is the richest country on the face of the earth, and working people have made it that way. So we in the labor movement believe it is unfair that any worker should toil for 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, and still earn less than a poverty wage. This is a matter of equity. It is a matter of dignity. It is a matter of plain decency. Therefore, we need a Congress that will enact a single universal minimum wage of at least $2.50 an hour for every person who works for a living, regardless of age, sex, color, or any other artificial barrier. We need a Congress that will stop the growing export of American jobs, capital, technology, and production by multinational corporations based in the United States. Organized labor is not against foreign trade, of course not. But we are against the outmoded 19th century trade policies that have lost American workers nearly 1 million job opportunities in the last 6 years. We are against trade policies that are eroding entire United States industries, textiles, shoes, clothing, steel, auto, rubber, electronic equipment. We are against trade policies that fatten corporate profits while undermining the American economy. We are against trade policies that allow multinational corporations based in the United States to produce goods abroad in cheap labor markets and then sell them in this country at high American prices, with no benefit to the consumer. We're against the philosophy that puts profits above patriotism. For all of these reasons, the AFL-CIO is strongly supporting the Burke-Hartke bill, which would bring our trade policies into line with modern economic realities. We want to see that bill passed in the next Congress. We also want to see the next Congress act to restore our maritime industry, which has almost been destroyed by short-sighted policies. We need newer, faster ships, built in America, with American-made products and manned by American seamen. We need to ensure that government-financed cargoes are carried in American-flag vessels, and to stop making it profitable for United States ship owners to register under foreign flags. In 1972, we must elect a Congress that will take a new look at the federal government's program of wage and price controls. As early as 1966, before the present administration took office, the AFL-CIO took a very clear position on the question of controls. We said we would accept wage controls provided that there were also controls on prices, profits, interest rates, dividends, and all other forms of income. In other words, we insisted that controls be equitable and across the board. We asked only that the controls be fair. Wages have been held down, but prices and profits have been allowed to skyrocket. Employers, naturally, are only too happy to police wage controls, but no effective machinery was ever set up to keep prices in check. And the result is that profits are going up while wage earners are caught in a squeeze. Our demand to the new Congress is very simple. Let's end this double standard. Either control prices and profits and other forms of income, just as wages are controlled, or abolish the entire controls program. We do not ask for favoritism, but we will not accept injustice. The AFL-CIO has often been called the people's lobby, and I believe that is true. On this Labor Day, as we look back at the progress we have made, I believe the trade union movement has much to be proud of. Indeed, were it not for the efforts of organized workers and their unions, most of the social legislation from which all Americans have benefited would never have come to pass. But we are not bogged down in our yesterdays. There is too much still to be done. There is a long agenda of unfinished business for the American people. And translating that agenda into action is the day-to-day work of the labor movement. Very often that work doesn't make headlines. There are some who say that that work is irrelevant, but they just don't know what it's all about. They don't know anything about the real needs and aspirations of the American people. And so we go right on working. We are working for a system of national health security to make health care available to every man, woman, and child at a price all can afford. This goal will never be met by schemes to further enrich private insurance companies at public expense. We are working for free quality integrated education. Education that does not end at the 12th grade, but extends to lifelong programs in colleges, universities, technical institutes, and adult education centers. This is a vital need in our technologically advancing society. We are working against compulsory arbitration schemes that would undermine free collective bargaining and force free American workers to labor against their will for the private profit of others. We are working to protect voting rights, civil rights, and civil liberties. We have made a lot of progress in overcoming the heritage of racial inequality, but we have a long, long way yet to go, and we intend to go the whole way. We are working for more consumer legislation in such fields as no-fault insurance, product safety, fair consumer credit, truth in labeling and advertising, honesty in warranties, and so forth. We are working for welfare reform, anti-pollution programs, a national land use policy, new energy policies, protection of workers' pensions in private industry. Some of these goals are new frontiers. Some are defense lines for the progress we have made. But if we are to meet these goals, we must elect a Congress that is committed to a massive investment in America and her people. And that is Labor's aim in this election year. We intend to do everything in our power to help elect senators and congressmen who are committed to our fair share philosophy of justice, equality, and progress for all Americans. And we intend to do everything in our power to defeat those candidates who are committed to privilege for the few and greater burdens, higher taxes, lower incomes, and less hope for the many. And so on this Labor Day 1972, our message to all union members and their families is this: study the issues, learn what is at stake, get to know the candidates and their records, and be sure you register and vote. If you want to know how your senators and representatives voted in the 92nd Congress, please write to us. Just send your name and address to AFL-CIO, Washington, D.C. 20006. We also have a message for the candidates on this Labor Day, and it is this: working people are the backbone of this nation, and they are not about to be shunted aside in the interest of any privileged elite. They are not on this earth to satisfy the greed of any economic elite, or the whims of any political elite, or the theories of any intellectual elite. They will not blindly support those who assault their most deeply held values, demean their intelligence, scorn their organizations, laugh at their patriotism, or sneer at their way of life. Nor will they support those who threaten their jobs, rob their pocketbooks, gouge them in the marketplace, and blame them for inflation. They will not be fodder for anyone's political cannons. The working man's vote is not in anybody's pocket. It has to be earned. Workers know the things that are wrong with America, but they also know they have a stake in our free and democratic institutions, institutions that are the envy and the hope of oppressed people around the world. Workers are not about to throw in with those who believe that America is the most evil power on this planet. The American worker is not a dingbat. He has the same capacity and right as anyone else to judge for himself where his best interests lie. He will not be taken for granted. Workers are not patsies for false promises and demagogic appeals. They are practical people. They do not demand pie in the sky. They do not insist on what cannot be done. But they do know what can be done to make the good life more real for more Americans, and they want progress toward that end. And that is what the American labor movement is all about, on this Labor Day, 1972.
Solidarity forever.